right. Well, hello and welcome to Team Reality Origin Stories, Volume 1. We are here with Show Me the Data, the Twitter luminary. You were actually one of my first favorite follows. You sort of got out of you got out of the gate before me, and when you followed me, I was very psyched about it. So, without further ado, introduce yourself.
Well, yeah, I am a mom who's in sales, and I happen to sell healthcare data. I graduated in international economics, and like a true economist, I thought, okay, we're going to make the most money with the least amount of effort, and that's why I went into sales. And so that's I've been in healthcare IT for about 20 years. And I think that knowledge combined with my upbringing where I was taught to question authority, which is really strange for a person who's a member of my church. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as a Mormon. People don't think of Mormons being those that question authority. They kind of put us in this like blind obedience, but I was raised to question everything. And
nice.
Between my sales and my upbringing and this idea that like just being curious, if someone tells me a story, I'm the first person to Google it to figure out whether or not it's true and what the source is. I think all of that background came together to where I am today.
Nice. Yeah, it's funny because I knew that you had an economic background. I knew what you did for a living, but I didn't make the data connection there. I actually totally assumed that Show Me the Data was about the COVID data because we were all screaming, show me the data for the last 2 years.
Yeah. And it is Show Me the Data. I finally landed on a name that resonated with myself and everyone around me. But I actually worked in data at the time COVID hit, which is why it was so second nature to me to go find the original data and be like, hey guys, look at this data, look at that data, look at this data, because everyone was just running with the narrative and they weren't looking at the CDC website. But I'm getting ahead of myself, but that's where the data comes from.
Well, that's cool. You know, that's funny. I had no idea. I'm so glad we're talking right now because I would have kept believing something that wasn't quite true. So obviously we met, our circles crossed because of the COVID pandemic reaction, which has been so insane, is hopefully starting to unravel now. But the purpose of these interviews is to really get a handle on people that we know via social media, especially Twitter. And Twitter is a very interesting place, and we'll talk a little bit more about sort of what makes Twitter unique, especially for this. But in terms of your social media prior to January 1, 2020, where were you? How out were you? And what sort of things did you talk about on social media prior to Jan 1, 2020?
I liked Twitter for watching the presidential debates because I felt like I could have feedback during presidential debates, and then to complain at Southwest Airlines.
Oh yeah.
That was it. I'd complain it. If I wasn't getting good customer support, I go to Twitter and I get customer support.
It used to work more than it does now.
Those were my primary uses for Twitter up until 2020.
Nice. Well, we have a screen cap of your Twitter profile prior to COVID. Is it okay if we show it?
Yeah.
Does this look familiar, even though it's in another language?
Yep. So yeah, that's my nickname among my friends. I'm the warden.
Does that mean that you hold people against their will from time to time?
No, it's just it was actually given to me by a guy who was drunk in a grocery store, and they're like, oh my gosh, that's perfect. So I was trying to get all my friends to leave. And because we were in a bad situation, I'm just the person that if there's someone that needs to be saved, I'm the one that goes and saves them. If I'm the one that says it's time for bed, I'm the one that says this is a bad situation, let's leave. I'm the one that gets up and gets the waiter because our food is completely wrong.
That's helpful.
Yeah. And those are my friends from college together at Saved by the Max, Saved by the Bell themed diner.
I love it. I can totally tell. It's so 80s. That's hilarious. You got the video game in the background. So this is from May 9, 2019, and you were at a hefty 354 followers. You had 354 followers. One of those, I'm assuming, was Southwest Airlines customer service.
Most likely not. Yeah, all 354 followers I had in 2019.
Nice, nice. All right, and let's stop that screen, and we will share. This looks like October 10th, 2020. And I think that this is probably the first one I remember seeing of yours. And this is a picture of you pointing at yourself and a cute cartoon in the background where the complex but correct path is lonely and zigzaggy.
Yeah, it's that's when I started getting controversial, and I didn't want a picture of me on there that was too distinguishable, just from because I worked at IBM Watson Health.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So I was at IBM Watson Health in early 2020, and then I moved to another company that was even far more liberal than IBM Watson Health is, and way down that tube. So and that was also when people were getting really hyper about doxing, and emailing your employers and whatnot. So I went with a less distinguished profile pic. The funny thing is that picture, I looked like one of Tim Young, who's a media personality, like ex-girlfriends apparently. And because I DM'd him with some data, he responded because I looked like somebody he knew. And Tim Young and I are now really good friends.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
That's funny. All right, let's do one more. And this way we can see the growth of
how
Twitter.
Many followers I have then.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Let me bring that back up again. And it looks like you have, well, this is almost a year over year, right? Maybe a little bit longer. And this is, you're up to 1,447.
Getting past 1,000 was hard.
That was a big deal. I remember when I did that, I did a little dance. Yes.
Yeah, that was active work. That's when I started realizing that I needed to be over 1,000 for certain people to see my responses. That's like when I started starting to figure out this whole Twitter thing, realized I needed to put a little bit of effort into it to get people to listen, because no one listens to little me with 300 followers.
The main one I remember, is this a CGI picture of you? Or
you remember when everyone on Facebook was using that app to make themselves into cartoons? I don't know if you remember
there's been several of them. Yeah. The one that makes you look old, the one that makes, yeah.
Yeah. My goal, again, the goal being is to not be able to reverse image search it and figure out who I am.
Well, this is, we leapfrogged to August 9, 2021, and you are up to 8,554. Wabam, wabam. And you got your Tiananmen Square graphic there. Very thoughtful. I like it. I mean, I don't like it, but
isn't that insane how long it took to go from 300 to 1,000, then from 1,000 to 8,000, and then from 8,000 to today it's just crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And it's interesting how, your personality, right, and your style and your lane, right, or your lanes start to resonate and start to get passed along and built among people. It's really interesting.
And understanding how to message appropriately and how to use Twitter appropriately, because that only came with time. There's no good how-to course on Twitter, on how to not just gain followers, because followers are only important because people listen to you, but how to get noticed by the people that matter on Twitter. Yeah.
Yeah. I think your point about, you have to get, kind of above 1,000, and you have to your point, you do have to get some bigger friends. You got to get some blue checks. You got to get some people who will engage with you and answer your questions and retweet you and et cetera, et cetera. You're totally right. You got to get that momentum, and you got to get that sort of that friendly, or that group of friendlies that can kind of carry you along and up.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And there's a few accounts that have walked into the group of friendlies and been lifted up very quickly, but that is by far the anomaly and not the rule.
It is. And fast forward to today, 42,000.1.
Right. Kind of.
I know. 156. Yeah. No, it's good though, because you have good things to say, and it's
It's because I'm pithy. It's amazing the power of pithy. Like I can put something out there that's super profound and like crazy important. You're like, no, pay attention. This is important. It gets like 300 likes. And I put something out like, I don't want to be caught wearing a mask, or like I wrote something about like I refuse to wear a mask even when I'm cold because I don't want to look like a pussy. And then it's like, whoo, 5,000 likes. You're like, no, but like this over here. This is the important stuff. That was just me. Oh, that's not what I want you to read.
Yep. And the worst is when you say something pithy, profound, and resonating, and you have a typo in it, or you totally chose like the wrong word, or there's some slight confusion about it, and of course there's no edit button. So yeah. What's up with this picture? You seem concerned. You seem, I would even say surprised.
That's how I look when I'm looking at my computer most of the day.
So this is literally just a selfie screenshot from your computer as you're doing what you do.
Well, I mean, I made the face. I have a hard time taking like formal pictures, being like, but I didn't want to like. I have something that has to be somewhat wacky. You look at most of my pictures that I use; it's always something a little off.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, that's a little trip to your Twitter profile, which I think is so super interesting because we all shift sometimes. And it is funny because like I remember when you did change from that sort of cartoon picture, like it took me a couple days to find you again, even though it says show me the data, like, we all go visually by the visuals. So when you got to take that into account, when you change your avatar, you're going to confuse a few people for a couple days. Just saying.
It has to be a strong, and that's something I learned it has to be a strong change. It has to be a change. It sucks that this matters, but it has to be a change with purpose that's actually going to make you better, like your profile better. And I felt like, first of all, switching from the cartoon, there were so many others that looked like that cartoon face. After a while, that was like, I don't want to be associated with you people. I need it to be different. I mean, I messed around with it a bit too. I put like my sister's face in there for a while because I didn't want I
remember that. I couldn't find that one though.
Yeah, I had some people coming after me pretty hardcore, trying to figure out who I was, it's just weird. I'm like, I'm just a mom on it. Why? Like, why do you care who I am?
Oh, they care. They care. They just want to punish people. It's a very icky and strange inclination by some, and it distresses me.
It's distressful. It really is. I mean, what they do to these physicians that speak out is just appalling, and they get away with it.
Do you think it's drying up a little bit now as of March 1, 2022? It feels like it is.
Yeah, if it's dried up so much more in real life than it has on Twitter, but it has dried up for sure.
That's true. So one of the things that I wanted to do was really walk through the COVID timeline, right? Because what is so interesting to me and to us is how individuals who are across the country, around the world, frankly, it's obviously a global network of people who are on Team Reality. The story of how they got on Team Reality is immensely interesting. And, again, like, some people started off as, Trump people and sort of, either immediately got on board or fairly quickly got on board, even though Trump was kind of, he was in favor of the lockdowns and whatnot. And then you have people on the complete opposite of the spectrum, hardcore Bernie bros who perhaps took a little bit longer, but are firmly on Team Reality now. And just, the trajectory, the personal story, the inflection points, right? Because we all lived through the same thing. We all saw the same events, the same news stories. We were all exposed to, almost all the same people, almost all the same, announcements and, most of the same data. And it is extremely intriguing how each individual from each individual background, right, with each individual perspective, right, sort of, imbibed these things and allowed it to change their personal journey. To me, this is just, the story of the pandemic, frankly, the personal stories. And with that, I'd like to start at January 1st, New Year's Day, 2020. And I mean, it's a little bit of an arbitrary date, right? But it is, it is kind of neat, having that be New Year's. So on January 1, 2020, in the United States, we were talking about Ukraine. They were getting ready to impeach President Trump for the second time on Ukraine. And where were you at this point? Where were you physically? Where were you mentally? Where were you politically? And had COVID come on your radar yet as of New Year's 2020?
So I think, to your first point, I think most of us that were early Team Reality members were independents. I think we are like anyone who did not have a political party. Like, I did not vote for Trump in the first election. I voted in the Democrat primary. Like, I pulled from both sides. I consider myself like a true independent. And when you aren't beholden to a party or to a personality, I think those people were the first ones to say, okay, this isn't lining up, because we don't do blind faith, right? We pick from both sides. In January, I thought that the impeachment was a sham, and it was to distract us from what was going on in China.
Really? So you were aware of what was going on in China before January 2020?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I was like, why is this? Why is everyone paying so much attention to this sham of an impeachment that's going to do absolutely nothing, when there's like this disease over in China? But this is back when I thought it was a legitimate, like, scary thing, right?
Andromeda strain coming over.
Exactly. I thought it was crazy scary. So I was I would go to like I remember my friend now, she's like, I will always trust you, because we were at a workout class, and I was like, look, I don't want to freak you out, but just make sure you've got your like water supply and your food supply. Just like just buy some extra stuff at the grocery. Just make sure you're prepared. Just don't freak out over it. And that's how I didn't want to freak anyone out. I just want to kind of sound the alarm, like, something's going on over there. It's going to come here. Just might want to be a little prepared. And so that was kind of like my gentle, like, push towards people. Just pay attention to what's going on in China. So much so that I even started like an emergency preparedness group on Facebook to have others join, because when I posted something on Facebook about it, people were like, well, how do you prepare? And I was like, well, I'm a practical prepper. I just like to have, shoes in my car, 72-hour kit in my car, nothing crazy, but I give them all these little like pieces of advice on how to prep. In the end, I feel like this prep group helped me retain some of my credibility when I did change my opinion on masks. So we get into February. And
so hold on. So you knew about the China virus? Before January, I'll say it. Before January 2020. When did you first see it?
It was in December sometime. I don't remember exactly when. But I have a friend who is related to Tag Romney. Mm-hmm. And so I had asked him about it. I was like, hey, do you know anything about what's going on in China through Tag? Like, has Tag told you anything? And then a few weeks later, Tag had given him the information that he's like, this is big and it's coming our way.
And when did you get that response?
That was like January. I got that information from my friend through Tag Romney.
So where did you first see evidence of? Did you see the fainting videos? What did you see in December? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I don't remember terribly well. I think that's part of what the Twitter too. I still came to Twitter for some news. I don't watch Fox. I don't watch CNN. I don't watch any cable news. So I would come to Twitter to consume news, but I didn't really get that involved in it. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably where I saw it first.
It was definitely on Twitter early.
Yeah, I think that's where I saw it first, was Twitter.
Interesting. And so you did what I think most of us would do, is you have a connection to somebody who's official, who might know something, mm-hmm. and you ask them to sort of ferret out any information.
Yep. Wow. And then on top of that, I told my family, and they all went and got food storage because of our faith. We were big on food storage. So they all went and got food storage before the run on food happened, and the run, I think, just weeks beforehand. They finally all listened to me, and they went and like took care of everything at the facilities. So yeah, it was interesting being ahead of the shutdown.
Wow. So in January, you were well on your way. You knew this thing was coming over. You were assuming that it was going to be bad. You felt like the politics of the moment in the United States was a distraction. Mm-hmm. And you were encouraging people to stock up and prep a little bit without trying to scare the ever-loving crap out of them.
Basically, yeah.
Nice. It seems pretty level-headed. Where do you remember any mention in the media about this in January?
No, no, none. Mm-mm.
A little bit of
It's
a
just driving me
rhetorical
nuts.
question, but yeah.
Yeah, it was just driving me crazy. Like it was driving me crazy because all they want to talk about was Trump. I'm like, this does not impact our lives at all.
Yeah, the reason I ask is same thing for me. I have very, very, very similar trajectory as you on almost everything. So, do you remember when Gottlieb wrote his article in the third week of January?
I don't.
Yeah, that was kind of the first mainstream mention. Tucker Carlson had done a segment in the first week of January on it, which was very interesting. Kind of it hit and then it went away because it went back to Ukraine. What was your reaction when Trump banned the flights from China sort of out of the blue at the end of January?
It didn't. So wait, when was CES? CES, the Consumer Electronics Show.
Right.
That was in January, I believe. And I had a friend who, or maybe it was, I had a friend who got sick. Maybe I can't remember. I had a friend that got sick after they went to see CES, and the plane he was on had come over from China.
Huh.
And his daughter got sick too before we knew what COVID was. And it was exactly, she had asthma, she had issues, no one could figure out what it was. And so the China thing, banning the flights from China because of my personal experience with this friend that had gone to CES and seeing how he got sick and his family got sick from it, and he was on that same plane. You know, I didn't know what to think of it, but it wasn't. I didn't think it was xenophobic. It seemed to make sense. If a disease coming over from China, let's just stop the flights from China.
Right.
Again, I was kind of in that information gathering stage where I didn't have strong opinions. I just was trying to figure out what was going on.
Yeah, interesting. I had again, once again, very similar reaction. So other than that, in January in 2020, what was going on in your life, like personally? Was it just sort of same old normal stuff, or were there any big changes?
Great. Are you kidding? I had a friend. You got picture those friends that you showed me at the Max. I had a friend that was, this is February, was in a charity boxing tournament in Nashville. And so I, flew out to a charity boxing tournament. I was going out to San Diego. We had spring break coming up in March. Like my job was super easy. I had really great work-life balance. Life was good. Life was pretty good. I had great set of friends, really good friends. I was crazy healthy. I was at my fittest level ever. Like it was, and my husband had we just decided that he was going to be a stay-at-home dad. That was the other thing in my personal life, is that we decided with his career versus my career, I made more money. I liked it better. He hated his job, and someone needed to be home for the kids full time because of where they are in their life. So he had just decided to become a stay-at-home dad in January.
Wow. Little did you know that you would both be stay-at-home parents very soon.
Yeah. Huh. So I kind of blend January and February together, like in my brain, like it congealed. It wasn't until we got to March that then it starts getting very distinct, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so there was a transition, right, from January to February. And again, I think you're right. Like it was sort of January, February, mush, and then March was the 2 weeks, and then, the beginning of the end. But there was a transition from January to February when the zeitgeist, right, the media, the narrative went from Ukraine into COVID. Right. Mm-hmm. What was your experience with that?
Narrative? I remember seeing them like spray the streets and spray the classrooms. I remember seeing that on the media and going, that is, I immediately was like, that is bogus. There's
what, in China?
In China. Yeah. I saw that. I'm like, this
the guys walking down the street with
yes. Yeah. I'm like, no, that's just crazy. Like, it's just crazy. And so, yeah, that's where I was when I saw it, because it seemed so extreme, everything they were showing on TV. Just,
and they were welding people in their homes, and they were, and at the beginning of February, we first started getting news of Italy and the nightmare, scenario that Italy became. What was your reaction? Because this was back when you were still concerned, right? What did you think when you saw Italy? Did that just increase your anxiousness?
I was always concerned. I was very concerned, but I was never pro lockdown. Like what they were doing in Italy seemed just inherently wrong. Right. There's certain things we know you need. We know you need sunlight. We know you need exercise. We know you need, there's basic human needs. So what was going on in Italy was concerning, but it was also kind of clear that it was old people. Like it was, even from the beginning, it was kind of clear that this is a very discriminatory virus. But I did not approve of how they were handling Italy from the very beginning.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We actually got news from Italy and data from Italy that we didn't use. What was your reaction to the Diamond Princess? Remember the death boat?
Yeah. Again, a lot of it didn't make sense to me. Like it just, I was in that information gathering stage. And if something doesn't make sense, I don't form an opinion. I wait and I dig and dig and dig. And like on the Diamond, it just didn't make sense. Again, it was also a bunch of old people. That's what I kept getting, is like, it's a bunch of old people. It's a bunch of old people. Like confirming that I was putting that thing together in my head where I'm like, this is not a child's disease.
Right. Or a young healthy person disease.
Yeah,
right.
It was the beginning. It was the beginning of that. I don't know that I knew that then. It was definitely laying the foundation that this is not the measles, you know?
Yeah. In February, we also had some of our politicians. We had Nancy Pelosi, and then in New York City, we had de Blasio and his health commissioner, Levine, encourage people to go to Chinatown, to go out, to mingle, to sort of, interestingly, they were kind of, on the absolute opposite side, right? Whereas you and some of us were, aware of the pandemic coming over, concerned about it. And then you have these politicians that, at least from my perspective, seem to be encouraging this kind of behavior from a, kind of like an anti-racism standpoint or so, like don't.
It was anti-Trump. It was what Trump set up, they set down, regardless of what was going on. Whatever was anti-Trump. And that's how I viewed it. After watching the media for so long, like, again, I did not vote for Trump, but I saw how the media treated Trump all those years. And they made me vote for him, basically, based on how the media covered him, because I knew it was so deceptive. And at that point, I saw everything that the Democrats did as a reaction to Trump, not a reaction to the virus. So Trump says, we're not letting planes in from China. And they're like, go to Chinatown. De Blasio shuts down the city, but he goes and works at the YMCA. It was, and at that point, I was in the panic. I still was in this panic stage of like, we need to protect our family. Like, why would you go out and do that? I don't know. It was weird.
But it stuck out at you as hypocritical or, just political. Yeah. That's very interesting that you did not vote for Trump. And then it seems like you were kind of primed for this based on the media's treatment of him throughout his entire presidency up until the pandemic came through, correct?
Right. I mean, when that comment he made about Hispanics and the was it M16? The gangsters, and he was making comment about banksters, and they try to paint that as like anti-Hispanic. And I went and I listened to the whole clip, and I was like, oh my gosh, you guys, people, he didn't say it. He didn't say what you said. And so I think that like complete distrust of the media was already in me, so that when this happened, I didn't take anything they said at face value at all.
Yeah. Well, so you were primed and ready. When was the first time you heard the name Fauci?
Was it February or March? It was March. It was March, I think. I think it was March. It was definitely March.
Interesting. What did you think the first time you were exposed to him?
I didn't think anything. I had no opinion of him or Birx. I had no opinion of anything at the time. Again, I was just trying to figure stuff out.
So if you didn't have any opinion personally of them, which is understandable if you hadn't sort of heard of them before, what was your opinion of public health, right? Which they represented, right? Which was, obviously the federal government's, best and brightest for this exact thing.
No, I've always had a negative opinion of public health because they focus on things that don't actually improve public health. You don't see, it's just, food stamps and you can't use those they're not designed for healthy food. You can use it on junk food. Why on earth are we paying our taxes to then fund our neighbors to get fat and sick? Like our neighbor, if you need help, great. I will buy you milk. I will buy you bread. I will buy you vegetables. I will buy you fruit. But why are we spending tax dollars on Doritos? And, that would be the basis of public health, would be getting Americans healthy. And the least healthy Americans are the poorest ones. And those are the ones that are using our, I mean, it's just such an easy fix, just such an easy fix. And then basic nutrition, you know, they try to fix health by putting calories on fast food menus. And it had the opposite effect because they didn't study it beforehand. You know, so people that were overweight put on more weight because they're like, oh, for $5, I can get 1,500 calories instead of 750 calories. I'm getting 1,500 calories for $5. Whereas for the healthy people, it helped us. So I already had a bad opinion of government in general. Everything that government touches, they just destroy. So yeah, no, I had no faith in the government.
So you did not see the Fauci and Birx coming in as, you know, any sort of saviors.
Benevolent saviors? No.
Interesting. I think that gave you a leg up on me because I actually was kind of thinking like, oh, here comes some people that are smart. They can help us.
I also worked with a bunch of hospitals, right? And I worked with a bunch of physicians and hospital administrators. So I was friends with an epidemiologist who's brilliant. I was friends with this brilliant epidemiologist. And so I think because I had so many smart healthcare people in my circle already, that those are the people I would have turned to ask for additional, like what they think, as opposed to looking at someone like Fauci, just because I was already in that space.
And did you tap into those people early on, or?
Yeah, no, absolutely. My friend that's an epidemiologist, she's now works for Microsoft. She, of course, didn't say anything publicly because she needed to feed her family. But she told me straight out of the gates, don't let them put you on a ventilator. Don't let them put anyone you love on the ventilator. These ventilators are not good. It will exacerbate the issue. Like, this is a terrible response.
When was that?
That was in March. No, that was in April. That was in April. She told me that in April. So wow. She was working she lives in Michigan. And so she was trying to get Michigan to open up and offered up her services to consult and whatever, just to get Michigan opened up because she knew the kids were fine straight out of the gate. And you saw how, I mean, Michigan was just a disaster. So she couldn't get anything accomplished.
Very interesting. It's nice to have pals like that.
Yes, it is.
Definitely.
It is. Yeah, for sure. And
so yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and that kind of segued me into immediately starting to like going down my rabbit hole in my tinfoil hat because of the friends I had in the area I was in. I mean, we haven't even gotten to March. I got COVID in March, by the way. So in that friends charity boxing tournament, and I was on 5 planes in 1 week.
So you were the super spreader.
I got the OG, yeah, for sure. And here's the crazy thing is, like, I was at my parents' house, who are both in their late 70s, one of which was going through chemo treatment when I had it because I was at spring break in San Diego. Neither of them got COVID. And I was in their house with my kids, my husband. Neither of them got it while I was there. And I totally had it. I had the hacking cough. I didn't have the sense of taste. But at that point, they hadn't identified those as like symptoms. Sure. And they was just, I was just like, I just have a weird flu. It's not COVID. And of course, my friend who is a physician is like, you clearly have COVID. Like, you obviously have COVID. And yeah, I have COVID. My daughter got it. She had the same hacking cough. And that's it. And I feel like that was a blessing too, because after I'd had it and I got it so early, I was like, it's no big deal. Dude, I know how my body handles it. I can go out and do whatever. I don't need to worry. And
you were also around old, frail people that didn't get it.
Right.
So it wasn't this, super duper transmissible thing that they've been warning us about. Obviously it is transmissible, but it wasn't as, scary potentially.
No, right. I stayed upstairs. They were downstairs. I kind of just kept my distance from them, but I was in the same
just
house.
Did normal sick stuff. Wash your hands. Don't touch your eyeballs. Don't hack on other people.
Right. Exactly. I know. Crazy.
Who would have thunk it? Well, so let's back up like one tiny half step. So we're coming up on the 1st of March, right? Mm-hmm. And that was that Medium article, the Washington Post article, those crazy models out of Imperial College, right, claiming that there was going to be 2 million dead in 2 months, and they started talking about flattening the curve, which obviously was meant to flatten the hospital curve, right, to keep people out of the hospitals, but it quickly morphed into a shutdown, and it was 15 days to slow the spread, where we were ostensibly going to quasi-voluntarily, but not lock ourselves in for 2 weeks. So walk me up to where you were right before that and then through that.
So right before that was spring break. Like right before they did the shutdown, I was in San Diego with my family for spring break.
And you weren't sick by this time, right?
I was sick with COVID the week before he shut down for COVID.
Okay. So that was in February.
It was March, wasn't it?
Well, 15 days to slow the spread was March 1 through March 15.
Yeah. So I guess it was February. I don't know. It's all such a mush. My brain's such a mush from that time. But I just remember we had COVID. Yeah, because they do spring break early in Texas. I had COVID at my parents', and then we came home and school was closed. And that's what I remember, school being closed. And my initial thought was about the abused kids trapped at home with their abusers, because of some volunteer work I'd done with abused and foster care. And that was the very first thing I thought about was child abuse. It wasn't anything else. It's just that the abusers and the children are now trapped in their homes, and those kids have no escape. And
right.
That was it. That was the very first anti-lockdown, like trigger I had. And that all of my tirade, like right then when I was going online, I was talking, I was in the comments, it was all about the abuse. And it's one of those things I wish I wasn't right about.
Yeah, I remember that as well. And it was something that came up early. And it was something that I think I knew, but because of the conversation around that, the fact that public schools are a really good place to catch abuse like that, right? Like public schools, I mean, say what you want about them, they are places, or maybe even not even public schools, but school is a place where, guidance counselors, teachers, other caring adults, even other kids notice when other children have signs of abuse. And I remember that being part of that conversation as well, because we've cut off school. There is a mechanism, not only are these, thousands, perhaps, hopefully not more, but a lot of kids across the United States being trapped in their homes with their abusers. We have also cut off one of the mechanisms that society uses to kind of notice that kind of abuse.
Yep, absolutely. And then, of course, the women in domestic abuse as well, right? They can't go to work. Their husband's not going to work. And now they're both angry and they're both stressed out and they're trapped at home.
Yeah. Yeah.
And nobody wanted to talk about them. I mean, early on, there were articles mostly there was one in NPR, which I shared quite a bit. And then there was mostly out of the UK. But in the US, it was just like everyone put their fingers in their ears and went, la, 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 la. We're just going to pretend like it's not happening.
That's pretty much what we did, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. I think we have a couple posts from you early on. Maybe you can walk us through these. This is your first one. We'll go back a couple weeks, but this is from February 8th, 2020. What are we looking at here?
Oh yeah, that's my gentle push to all my Facebook friends not to panic, but just make sure you're prepared. Don't panic. But I can help. And that's what started. That's the post that started my emergency prep group, the one that everyone started responding to, and I'd start getting DMs from. And I was like, okay, I'm just gonna make a group on Facebook.
Nice. I don't know if I knew that you were sort of a light prepper before this, but that is a very handy skill.
It's just, again, practical, not too much off the deep end. Yeah, there's a machine you can get that will jump your own car. Just stuff like that. Just get that little machine, put in the back of your car. You can jump your own car. You can charge your phone from it.
Nice.
The number one thing to keep in your car outside of gas is tennis shoes. Because if you're driving and you're in like dress shoes and you get stuck on the side of the road and you have to start walking, you're going to want the tennis shoes. So that's that. I mean, it's just stuff like that. Very practical. Not good. Outside of being prepared at home, the next place you're going to get stuck is in your car. I
think we need to do an entire other episode on practical planning and prepping.
I helped my congregation do it for many, many years. So that was kind of like my specialty. I actually helped this congregation become practical preppers. And then I moved, and then the ice storm hit Texas and they all lost their electricity. And I was like, I told you it was coming.
Walking through the snow in their high heels.
Yeah.
Well, but it's interesting, your tone here. Friends, no need to panic. But with what's going on in Wuhan, it's a good reminder to ensure you have enough food and water in your house to last at least 3 months. Again, this was February 8th. And, thinking back to again, the national media narrative, the coronavirus was just kind of starting to trickle into the nightly news, right? It had literally been ignored for the entire month of January.
Yeah.
Right. And then I think that if I remember this correctly, Trump banning those flights was kind of the first splash it had in the mainstream media. You are correct. They immediately framed it as him being racist. Right. And, there were millions of people that just were taking from this like, oh, Trump is just being mean to China. Right. They didn't even delve down into the reasoning for what he was doing. And then there was the State of the Union, I think, before this, where he mentioned, the pandemic. And that was when Nancy Pelosi ripped up his speech, I think.
I remember that. Yeah, for sure. Good
Lord. So did anybody reach out to you? Because you offered your practical prepper services here. Were anybody at this point freaked out enough to sort of reach out on the side and say, hey, what do I do?
It was about general prep, nothing about China. Nothing about China at all. Nobody except for that one friend who I knew that had the Romney connection and he's kind of a prepper himself. His sister's married to Tag. He's the only one that we talked to about this stuff because he has that same prepper tendencies.
Right. So this was on Facebook. And so up to this point, you were not actively engaging on Twitter, correct?
There was nothing to actively engage on, right? I'd had all of 300 followers. So it's not like if I posted anything, anybody would care.
You were just imbibing at that point from Twitter. Mm-hmm. What about your conversations on Facebook at this point?
It was all kind of this tone of just, you may want to look out to what's going on.
So nothing about the virus, nothing about the old people, nothing about Italy or the Diamond Princess or Trump or any of that stuff.
No, none of that stuff. I was not that clued in. I still had my wonderful life and I was all happy and I was living it, and just that little spidey sense about Wuhan in general. But it didn't become my hobby until a few months later.
Interesting. And it is a hobby, isn't it?
It's the worst hobby ever.
It's the worst hobby ever. Fast forwarding to Feb 26th. Look at this. How helpful are you?
Yeah, that's when people were starting to panic about stuff. And I was like, seriously, guys, let's just wash our hands. Like, let's just all wash our hands. Let's not get too crazy. We don't have to get, again, back to the practical prepper me. You don't have to go out and just start washing the hands and life will get better. Again, this is before we knew it was aerosol, not droplet. And I had no idea the difference between aerosol, droplet, disseminated disease. Like, I was super naive, but I thought, okay, let's just wash our hands.
Yeah. Well, it's always good advice. What was the reaction to this?
Everybody's like, yeah, we need, again, people were on board with this idea of washing your hands. This is a very popular idea.
Very, very unoffensive suggestion, I guess.
Yes. There was no one that was like, you crazy. You want to wash hands? No. Like,
that's funny. I think it's very interesting how personally dovetailed your trajectory and my trajectory are, because this is exactly what I was, not this exact meme, but this was exactly what I was sharing on my Facebook. Again, not on Twitter at this point.
No, you and I are as soon as you and I met in the chat, there was an instant like kinship in the way we think and process stuff, for sure. Definitely.
Okay. So boom, March 12th. This is almost at the end of the 15 days of initial misery. And you posted this. Oh God, I can't tell you. I think I posted the same damn thing with almost the same description. What was the reception to this?
Oh, there's so much we don't know.
Oh, you got that response too, huh?
There's so much. Oh yeah, but there's so much we don't know.
It's a novel virus.
Right. Why would we look for hope when we can be afraid?
That's a pretty good slogan. Did you just come up with that?
Yep.
You should put that on a t-shirt.
Yeah, for sure. Let's put that. That's kind of like Team Apocalypse right there. Why would we hope when we can be afraid?
You got this from Information. It's beautiful. I was all over this site right about here. And they actually almost pegged the IFR fairly early. And I remember sharing the crap out of their stuff. They had very good stuff. I think it was certainly erring on the scary side, right? Like I think that they're even, for months and months and months, their IFR and CFR were, I felt artificially high after I had done my own research, but certainly a lot lower than what the groups, the masses believed. So this, yeah. So you were getting the sense at this time that the horses were fleeing out of the barn, right?
Right. Like everyone was panicking over something that really wasn't that big of a deal.
Nice. Well, okay. So to that point, right, mid-March, and you were getting the sense that everybody was sort of running by you in a panic. What did you make of that shift in sort of the narrative or the culture?
I was trying to figure out what the solution is quickly so that we could just like end this now and get the kids back in school. And that's when I became a pretty pro masker. I was a big masker. Like I was a really big masker in March. I would like to say back when the CDC was against I was wrong about masks before anyone else was wrong about masks. We were wrong about masks first. So I started thinking, okay, let's just mask everybody up and then open everything up. Like that was my thought, is like, we can let's just take care of it by masking up and opening up and we'll be fine. And
exactly the same as me.
Yeah.
To the letter. There
Besides, I look 28 years old in a mask. Why would I not be on board with this? Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're of the perspective that we need to get back to normal, it is understandable that you're going to embrace masks or even like testing or anything that is other than locking everybody inside and turning off the businesses and keeping the kids out of school. Right.
Just anything to get it open again, like get life going, whatever it takes. We're not stopping the panic train. Let's just do what we can to open everything up. Because again, nice. we didn't have the data that we had April 25th of 2020. And once we got the data out of Europe, April 25th, 2020, it should have ended. Everything should have ended April 25th of 2020. Like it was so clear after we got the data out of Europe. But that didn't happen.
Let's talk about this for a little bit, because one of the things that I've struggled with a little bit, or a lot, honestly, especially early on, was this desire, and it's a good desire for everybody to help everybody else, right? And there was a fleeting spell at the beginning of this where that felt like it was going to function correctly, where communities were going to look after each other. There was an effort, I forgot what it was called. It was like, protect the protectors or something. It was a hashtag, and it was really short-lived, but it was about, finding elderly people in your neighborhood, making sure they don't come out, taking food to them. So explain to me what was going on here.
Honestly, I could talk a full 2 hours about the bread, because it saved
a lot of bread.
Yeah. So prior to this, for about 5 or 7 years, we took what they call shrink bread from a company called Central Market. It's a high-end grocery store in Texas, their bakery. And on Sunday mornings, we'd go by and we'd pick up all the shrink bread. And we're talking pies and cakes and delicious, hearty, delicious, that they were going to throw out. And we deliver them to the homeless shelters in Fort Worth, Texas. And so that was a family thing we did every single week. All they needed is someone to pick it up and deliver it. Otherwise, it got thrown away. And every night of the week, a different charity would come by and pick up the shrink bread. Well, we became friends, of course, with the people that work at Central Market, because that's just who we are. And then when COVID hit, the charities stopped picking up the bread. They didn't come because their volunteers were scared, or because they had so much from the restaurants and the universities donating their food. But they called us, and because they couldn't figure out their baking schedule, they had, we're talking 10, 15 carts full of bread and baked goods that they were throwing away because no one was picking them up. And they called us and they said, can you get it? Can you do something with it? And Brent luckily was working. My job was really slow, and I was like, we can do this. I can do this. I can find hungry people and get the bread to them. And so every night we'd go, we'd fill up his truck full of bread and baked goods, and then go home. And then next day I'd be calling charities all over town, seeing who could take it, who couldn't, and no one could take all of it. It'd always be like a part of it because there was just so much. And then I ended up developing a network where I found like this Tongan community that would come, and they picked it up, and then they would distribute it within the Tongan community, and they'd go door to door. And there's these really great stories of people that found hungry people and their neighbors that didn't even know their neighbors and didn't know that they were hungry, but because they had the bread, they went and delivered it to their neighbors. And there was a teacher who had created bags for her kids, and she'd take it to school, and the kids would come in to pick up the bags. And it was this huge project for our family. And every day it was a project, because as soon as we got all the bread, next day, there's another garage full of bread that we have to figure out where it goes.
Wow. And
it's funny because there's some in our religious community, some leaders are like, well, you shouldn't be doing that. You should be going out. And I was like, I'm sorry. I don't stay home to save lives. That's just not who I am. Like, I didn't buy it. I don't buy that I'm going to save a life by sitting home and watching Netflix. It's not my personality. And so one of the charities we found, this Arlington Mission, the lady who runs it's like 80 years old, and she is tough as nails. And it was great. In this time where you saw millennials sitting at home, they're perfectly healthy, watching TV. There's this 80-year-old woman out there getting food out, delivering it to the homeless, taking care of others. It saved us mentally, because if I was told just to stay home, I would have gone crazier than I already went. Because I did go like start questioning my own sanity in early April. Like, I genuinely started questioning my own sanity because of what I was seeing, and nobody else was seeing what I was seeing.
So when was this?
So this was all the way all the way until we left Texas in November of 2021. We had the bread every night.
Wow.
And after a while, we were able, after about a month of figuring things out, we got other people to help. So it wasn't just on my husband to pick up the bread every night and deliver it the next day. So we found other families to help assist after the first month of kind of just like figuring out the vibes, figuring out the charities. Like, there was a Syrian refugees community that got it. Like, it was nuts, but it was a fun project for our family to have, to feel like, okay, we aren't helpless. We can do something at this time. And all that was required is that we show up. Like, there really wasn't anything that spectacular. We just showed up and picked up the bread and made a few phone calls and got it where it needed to go.
And you weren't obviously not concerned because you had already had COVID.
Yeah.
Or at least that was a big part of it.
Well, and even if I didn't have COVID, like, it's food. People are hungry. Like,
and you're young and healthy.
Right. I'm young, I'm healthy. And even if I wasn't, like, people are hungry. It's kind of like when I took an EMT course once, and when somebody's hurt, the first thing you do is make sure that they're breathing, right? You got to make sure they're breathing. Doesn't matter if their arms chopped off or if there's blood gashing out of their neck. If they're not breathing, none of that else matters. Right. So like, they're hungry. Let's get the food.
That's a good point. Man, it feels like that, that we, again, the collective we, forgot about a lot of this very basic stuff because they were so panicked, and it's so good that somebody like you and your family, picked this up.
Texas
and did it.
Texas was great with stuff like this too. Cause we would go by every day. There were churches with all these fruits and vegetables there, just like for people to come get. Like, Texas, I love the Texas people. There's a lot I don't like about Texas, but I love the Texas people. So yeah, the churches, there's a church in every corner, and it's where every church had like food distribution for those. The other part of this was finding how to get food to people that were too proud to go to a shelter or to a pickup, like dentists that may have student loans, but their offices were closed for 3 months, and they've got 5 kids. And they may not they still have to pay their student loans, and they still have to pay their office overhead, and they can't go in and practice work, or hairdressers or personal trainers.
Yeah.
And so there was this whole class that is too proud to go to to get food, right, from a donation center. And so they were a lot of people that we gave food to at that time, just so that they didn't feel like they were a charity case.
Right. That's interesting. But you did it.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. It's one of those family core memories that we'll never forget.
Well, that's a great picture. And thank you for doing that. And I'm sure that the people that you gave the bread to would say thank you, or did say thank you as well.
No one was, and I'm not saying this to be like trivial, no one was blessed more than our family. No one really was blessed more than our family at that time.
Nice.
Yeah. It was a blessing.
Wow. So, all right. So we are through the 15 days. And it didn't stop at 15 days. Was that a surprise to you at this point, or did you kind of see it coming that it was just going to keep going?
It was a surprise, and I started getting angry.
Interesting.
I started getting angry.
When did you realize that it wasn't going to stop at 15 days?
I don't know when I realized it wasn't going to stop. They canceled. So what started getting me angry is that the governors started canceling elective procedures in their states. And again, my background in healthcare, I know what an elective procedure is. Right. Most Americans don't understand when a governor cancels an elective procedure, what that actually means. And I had clients in the middle of Arkansas or, nowhere, Texas, that had completely empty hospitals. They didn't have COVID cases, but they also couldn't do cardiac surgery. They couldn't do colonoscopy screenings. They couldn't because the governor canceled all the elective cases across a massive state like Texas. And in this time when they're like, trust the experts, they didn't trust healthcare experts that run these hospitals, trust the hospital administrators to say, you know what, we're not going to do elective cases because we have too much COVID. Like, that's where the decision should have been, but it wasn't there. And so I started freaking out because I knew what the downstream effect was of not getting a colonoscopy in the appropriate amount of time. And that's when I started really hitting Twitter, being like, trying to get into threads and educating people on what an elective procedure is.
So that was your first jumping into Twitter.
That was my first, like, I've got to go somewhere and do something. Like, I've got to do something. And that was my first, and it was the elective procedures was that first, outside of the abuse, which I was on Twitter for abuse, but abuse went to elective procedures, and that whole narrative and what the long-term implications are of a blanket cancel of elective procedures. Stage 1 cancer treatment in Texas is an elective procedure.
Right. Yeah. Good luck with that cancer.
They had no COVID cases. They couldn't. I mean, it was.
But they could have.
That's right. They could have. In San Angelo, Texas, which is a remote oil town in the middle of nowhere with no COVID cases, let's just not do any cancer screenings there, or cardiac surgery, because anything that can be scheduled is elective. And that's also when I started queuing into. I found the Becker's article on the hospital layoffs. And that Becker's article, I think, that was my first like big hit in Twitter. It was when I started sharing the Becker's article, because no other news source was reporting. They're all saying the hospital's overwhelmed, yet while completely ignoring that they're all laying off staff because of the lack of elective procedures. And that was probably that was like my little find that I was able to contribute to the conversation, along with like the nursing homes, not beaches narrative.
Well, so to that point, I have a tweet from you from back then, I think. Okay, and here is a tweet I think is from around that time, right? This is when you transitioned into your hospital overflow.
Yeah, and look at it's Alex. May he rest in peace.
Yeah, Alex Berenson.
It's That's all, right. And it was all fighting in the comments section. It wasn't actually me tweeting. It was going to the comments, going to bad articles, going to people that were talking about this and trying to get them to pay attention.
Let me guess. You thought that if you presented facts and data and rationality, that you actually might be able to change some of these people's minds.
Or at least like they just didn't know. I was like, oh, you don't know. You just don't know. You don't know that 94, which eventually ended up being like 200 and something, because that Becker's hospital article kept getting updated over and over as soon as layoffs were announced. I thought maybe somebody would have cared, but somebody did eventually. That's the article I actually sent to Tim Young when Tim Young was talking about something. I DM'd him that piece, and that's what made us become friends.
Wow. Yeah, April 14th, 2020.
Mm-hmm. And
What did they do?
and that's when I started questioning my own insanity. I'm, if you are, I think any sane person goes through this. If you realize if you're the only person thinking something's wrong and everyone else thinks is right, it is going to be natural for you to turn internally and be like, maybe it is me. Maybe I am the problem. Like maybe there's something. I sincerely, at that point, was questioning my own sanity. And thank heaven I found like Newman Nas on Twitter, because like Newman and this Dallas data and analytics guy, the two of them were the first ones that I found, and I was like, oh no, I'm not crazy. There's others. There's others.
Newman was definitely a connector for sure, an early connector.
Yeah.
This is Polymath talking or answering Jonah Goldberg. Why don't you take us through this? This is April 30th, and then I think wasn't Polymath one of your first biggies that followed you?
Yes, he was. Yeah. He was. He and I had a conversation about at-risk contracts, and there we go. There's my boob job comment, like talking about how everyone thinks that elective procedures. I think the whole conversation there was about like the misunderstanding. There's so many things that the general public doesn't understand.
Right.
Like he's saying the general public doesn't understand what stay at home means. Like, and I was like, yeah, and also the general public doesn't know what an elective procedure means. He was the first cool kid on Twitter to like me, which is absolutely critical to gaining any sort of traction there whatsoever.
That is right. That is right. He was an early follow of mine. I don't know if it's a guy or a girl, but
it's a dude. He's a nice dad in Tennessee.
Oh, nice. Good for him. I think
Tennessee now. He was in I think Washington first.
It's been very helpful for sure. And Jonah Goldberg is trying to make the Ulsterholm point here that it doesn't matter if it's been created or originated. I don't agree with that.
No. Clearly not, especially if we funded it.
Yeah. Do not look here. These are not the droids you're looking for.
Right. Exactly.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's so interesting to look back at sort of the time machine, and see what we were thinking, see what we said, see what other people said. And to see also if people adjusted, So we're getting through April 2020. We're getting into early summer. So how did you guys as a family spend your summer? We didn't come out of the 2 weeks. The 2 weeks was extended. They canceled school for the rest of the year. What was your mindset and your family situation, coming out of that spring, going into and through the summer?
So that summer I started a new job.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So at the end of June, I started on with a new company. And so that took luckily that was a nice distraction from everything else. My husband was home with the kids. I mean, they did it at home distillery. We had a really great garden in the backyard.
Making illicit booze in the home. That's great.
Seriously, like literally teaching the kids how to we're trying to work on practical skills. I printed out, we didn't start the fire, and use that for like our history lessons every day. She knows who Harry Truman, Doris Day, Red China, Johnny Ray. I mean, she knows who all those people are now because of that summer at home. But I was focused on my new job. And then that new job, they wanted to put me into management, and I had no desire to be in management, but they said, fine, I'll take the manager job. And at the same time, that summer was the summer Greg Abbott decided he was opening Texas, but he really didn't open Texas, and it pissed me off. There's a hairdresser in Texas. Her name's Shelley Luther, and she's the reason Texas opened. Prior to that, Greg Abbott was like, I'm opening. I
remember her.
In shopping malls, and you can play sports in groups of 4. I'm sorry. All he did was make it okay for his donors to golf. Like, kids can't play basketball, kids can't play baseball, but your donors can golf. And I was no fun at parties. Like I remember going to this birthday party, and the women were like, oh, we're opening up next week. I'm like, we're not opening up. Like, they were all happy about it. I was like, what are you talking about? We're not opening up. Greg Abbott's donors can golf. I'm like, movie theaters, what movies are in the theaters? Shopping malls, what do you want to buy? Like, no, this is just a way for Greg Abbott to look like he's doing something. And all he did was make it so his buddies can go golfing. And then after I said that, I saw everyone's face. And I'm like, oh, I need to be cool. I need to stop coming to these things. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just feel the buzz here. Like, everybody was so happy. And I was really angry at Greg.
But you were right.
I was angry because that's why I lived in Texas. I'm from San Diego.
Right.
I gave up my beach for my freedom. Like I wanted to live in a state that was going to protect my rights as soon as like the crap hit the fan. And he folded like a wet napkin. So I was pissed. Like
he really did.
Texas summers suck. I hate Texas summers. And so at that point, like my husband and I were going through this, like we'd always talked about moving to South Carolina because he's from Kentucky. I'm from San Diego. They meet South Carolina, Kentucky and San Diego. So we kind of had this idea of like moving east. And then the Texas had said, our health department had said that schools weren't going to open. And I was like, screw it. If I'm going to be pissed at the government, I'm going to be pissed at the government by the beach. And my husband, we just decided, we found a house. My husband got on a plane to go look at a house in Charleston. And that weekend, my boss, or that Friday, my boss called me. He's like, okay, we're ready to make you a manager of the West Coast. And I was like, well, we're actually thinking about moving east. He's like, okay, I need to know in 24 hours if you want the West or the East. And so my husband was out here and I was like, well, what do you want to do? He said, well, it feels right. Let's do it. And I kid you not, on Monday, I got an email from my school district saying that because my son's special needs, he got to go to school in person. On Tuesday, Ken Paxton said health departments can't shut down schools. And on Wednesday, our school system said, okay, we're doing in-person schooling. But I'd already made the decision to move east. So it was done. I could have backtracked. I could have said, but there's something, he's like, nope, this is the time for us to leave. It's time to move. And so then in that fall is when we moved to Charleston.
Nice. So you suffered through a Texas summer.
My last Texas summer.
And then moved east. And South Carolina's been pretty good, right? Ish.
Okay, on some things they've been great. Like we were the first state in the country to go mask optional, to wear, like before even Florida.
And when was that? Was that the early 2020 school year?
It was 2020. In 2020, after, well, I mean, nobody went mask mandatory till September of 2020, right?
Right.
So it was in April of 2021 that our governor said that you institute opt-outs. And so you could opt out of the masks at school. And he was the first governor in the country to opt out before even Ron DeSantis did anything about it.
Wow. Nice.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's not, yeah.
And the story behind that is he decided that the day after my daughter talked to the school board. So my 12-year-old goes and talks to the school board because her principal at school said, look, if you want the mask to come off, it's not my call, it's the school board's call. So she goes and talks to the school board. And the very next day, Governor McMaster is like, you don't have to wear masks in school anymore. And I tell my daughter, I'm like ecstatic. And she's like, well, yeah, I talked to the school board. The principal said all I had to do was talk to the school board. Now we don't have to wear masks. Duh. Like, you don't even understand how big this is. Like, it's such a big deal. And she's like, no, but like, I did what I was supposed to do. Of course, I don't have to wear masks anymore. So anyhow, South Carolina's been better than most for sure.
Nice.
Yeah.
So in 2020, in the summer, I don't know if you remember this, but there was a whole lot of rioting going on. And the science allowed the rioters to go and riot because apparently COVID operates in riot atmospheres like it does in restaurants.
Only if it's the right cause, though. Remember,
yes.
Prior to that, if you showed up and protested against the lockdowns, that COVID can spread at those kinds of. And
you were arrested. Yeah, and exactly. they came down hard on you. What was your take on that?
My biggest issue was with the teachers who were willing to risk contracting COVID because Black Lives Matter, but weren't willing to risk contracting COVID to teach those Black minds, to ensure that those Black minds mattered. Because and here's the other thing about the riots, if the only party you're allowed to go to is a protest, everyone's going to show up. You know, there was no concerts, there was no sporting events, there was no school dances, of course the world's going to be on fire. And of course all the teenagers are going to show up because there's literally nothing else they're permitted to do. That's
interesting. I actually hadn't thought about that, about sort of the fact that they were probably a little bit bloated because of, that's literally the only place you can go and gather. And I mean, it's not a party, but it's it really kind of. I mean, look, they had music. They're out and about. They're socializing. It was far. They couldn't go to a club. They had fires. Right. They had free goods and services. Free stuff. Yeah.
But it's because there's nothing else to do. So yeah, no, that was frustrating. And I was naive and hopeful that people would see that these weren't super spreader events, and that that nobody, like there wasn't mass death after it, and that would just open everything up.
And what was your response when that didn't happen? What was, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that turned into more anger. It went from frustration just to downright anger. But also, I was in Texas, and because we had Shelley Luther go to jail, Texas did open up. And I feel like I was insulated from that, whereas the rest of the country still hadn't quite opened the way Texas was opening up that summer.
Now, for those of us that because, you know, it's like a fire hose of information, you know, 24/7. I remember Shelley Luther. I remember that situation, but I kind of don't remember how it ended up.
So Shelley Luther, she was actually wealthy, and she owned the salon, and she said, I'm just opening it up. And in a way that only a wealthy woman can do, that's well connected, knowing that if I go to jail, I'm going to be fine. Right? Like I can afford to be bailed out of jail. I'm done with this. I'm opening up my salon. And because she was a wealthy white woman who went to jail for going to work and having her team, which wasn't wealthy. I mean, people talk about using your privilege appropriately. Like this is using your privilege appropriately, literally knowing that because of who I am, if I go to jail, all these laborers, and it's not like the salon industry is full of rich women, right? Like these are people that barely make it week to week, rely on those tips. Those are people that I was feeding with my bread. My hairstylist would come by and he would pick up like a box of bread every week because he was struggling. Anyhow, so Shelley goes to jail, and because of who she is, she gets the attention of Ken Paxton, who is, oh gosh, what is he? He's the Attorney General of Texas. So Ken Paxton and Ted Cruz. And you got Ken Paxton, Ted Cruz. Guess what Greg Abbott has to do then? Like he's got Texan politicians making him look bad, drawing attention to this woman who went to jail because of his lockdowns. And that forced Greg Abbott to reverse the lockdowns. It was Shelley Luther. It had nothing to do with Greg Abbott. He is a wet napkin and I hate him. I will not let anyone say anything nice about Greg Abbott around me.
It's okay. That's okay. How long was she in jail?
Oh, I think it was just one night.
Huh.
It was just one night, but they broadcast her case. You could see her virtual trial online, and she was, I mean, she's a tough lady. She tried to pivot that into a career in politics. It didn't quite work, but it's sad though, because she's not a household name in Texas. They remember the hairdresser, but I was out to dinner with friends the other night in Texas, and I brought up Shelley Luther, and they're all, who? I was like, dude, like we have what we have today because of Shelley Luther. Like,
that's really interesting. That's good. You're right. I mean, it's like, you know, the fact that she was a wealthy white woman who could afford to do this, you know, and again, it's like, maybe that's where her courage came from, because she knew that she had enough, you know, pull or enough lawyers to sort of help her, you know, cushion, you know, her trajectory here. But the fact that she did it,
she's like,
is amazing. Good for her.
To jail because, you know, she had nothing to lose by being shut down for all summer long. Like really, she didn't. She could afford to be shut down all summer long. Right.
And a lot of people did. A lot of very wealthy people just shut their mouths and went against their principles and swallowed their courage and just.
Or even worse, Mark Cuban
pushed it.
Mark Cuban went out and hired narcs to go narc on businesses in Texas that weren't adhering to the 6-foot rule and weren't masking.
Is that true?
Yes, it's true. Like he and I got into it on Twitter over this. Like a few months ago, it was fun. I got into it with Mark Cuban. That's the bonus of having followers, is that Mark Cuban actually responds to you. But yeah, no, he like, it's documented. He hired narcs.
Did he block you?
No.
Good for him. I give people a couple points for that. Yeah. But do you have the receipts for that? Because that's
for sure. And I posted it there. Like you could, when you get off, just Google
that's
Mark.
Surprising.
Yeah,
wow.
DuckDuckGo it.
I did not know that.
Mm-hmm. He hired narcs. And because I remember when that happened, I was like, well, why don't you go to where the virus is actually spreading, in nursing homes? Oh yeah, because there's a chance your people would actually contract the virus. Like if you actually cared about saving lives, why don't you send your secret shoppers to nursing homes? Because I was super big on the nursing home kick when he did that.
He hired narcs.
He hired narcs.
What the?
To report on small businesses.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I mean, I'm not like a big Mark Cuban fan or anything, but that's disappointing.
Yeah.
Ick. That's not something you want on your permanent record there, Mark.
Nope. Nope.
Yeah, a lot of people have done a lot of uncool and embarrassing things, to put it lightly, in the last 2 years. And a lot of them are on record having done it. So it's going to be interesting the next little while getting out of this. Wow. Okay, so Shelley Luther, yay. Mark Cuban, boo.
Exactly.
Moving on to the fall of 2020. So do you want to take a break, or?
No, I was gonna say, you can't overlook my favorite tweet ever, though, from that summer.
Oh, okay. Let's do that. Let's do that.
When I discovered Martin Kulldorff, there's this tweet I tweet out. Martin only had like 500 followers, and at this point, I had more followers than Martin, and I was like, "How I remember this guy only have 500 followers?" And I will, like, that is my claim to, like, I was ahead of the curve, because what a hero he is, right?
Yeah. No, I remember this tweet. I remember when you did this, because the Great Barrington Declaration launched, I think, in August of 2020. I was one of the first 100 citizen normie signers of that thing. Like, I don't know why. Like, I saw it come up. I clicked it, and I was like, this is what I've been waiting for, a plan B, a second opinion. Like, I didn't even read it like super closely at first. I got the gist. I'm like, focus, protection. I'm in. I signed it. I shared it. And you're right. Like, you know, the fact that, you know, Jay wasn't even on Twitter. I think Martin was way before him. But I remember your tweet. I remember it specifically, where you were like,
I've retweeted a few times since, me like, you need to trust me on things, because see who I discovered when he had only 500 followers? Like, it's Mark. Yeah. I'd read an article by him, and it was one of those articles that gave me hope that smart people weren't stupid. And then I was actually like, I wasn't crazy. And so when I read this article by him, to this day, I can't find that article. I don't know which article it was he wrote. But then I went and found him on Twitter, and I followed him on Twitter because I had found this article. Again, I like to dig, like, to the source. And then I found the article, him on Twitter. And then, yeah, that was my beginning of my admiration of Martin.
The fall of 2020, right? You know, you had moved to South Carolina. Our kids were all back in school, kind of.
We were homeschooling.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, we're like, let's try this homeschooling, because I was so pissed. I was like, you're not getting my tax dollars.
Good for you. Good for you.
We always talked about homeschooling. So my husband tried homeschooling. We stuck at it. It's not for our family. My kids need something else. It was a miserable, miserable trial, but we did it for.
It doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. So we homeschooled.
Yeah. So the fall of 2020 was very interesting politically, right? Because we were ramping up to the election. The permanent pandemic had settled in, right? You know, we were talking about that, you know, how we sort of, you know, with each one of these instances, right? You know, and again, you and I are so eerily similar to the trajectory. Like, each one of these things, like, hey, even though the riots suck, nobody got sick. Oh, you're not going to notice that. You're going to sort of keep harping on this other stuff that doesn't exist. Yes, very depressing. You could sort of see where we were going again, which is straight to this permanent pandemic place. And then here come the elections, right? And it was very interesting, because this is when you and I met on Twitter. I think that we were both pulled into a mutual Twitter group. Is that correct? I think so.
I wasn't pulled into that group until till 2021.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't until after I deleted my account that I was pulled into the chat. The group. Interesting.
Because I knew who you were before then. I remember you deleting your account, and I remember you coming back. I'm not sure then how we were introduced. Maybe we just started following each other.
I think we just started following each other. I mean, I didn't even know Twitter chats existed until we were pulled into that chat together. I was like, what is this?
Interesting, because I thought that you were in there before you deleted and you came back in. But anyway, no, it was I do remember that. And then obviously the election happened, which was a whole, I mean, that was just insane, right? The entire, you know, from, you know, late October through, you know, the late January, right? The entire election was very, very messy, you know, contentious. And I don't know if you noticed this, but I felt like a lot of our mutual, more default Democrat friends, that was sort of a weird transitionary period for them as well. And as somebody who, you know, I'm an independent, but I did vote for Trump that first time, and then I did vote for him last time as well. It was very interesting to witness the political shift of some of our mutual acquaintances. Did you notice any of that through that period?
I think a lot of them at that time had this idea that if the Democrats get what they want, it'll be over. And I kind of had the same idea too. Like I didn't vote for
Or the
Biden.
hope?
Yeah, but like, okay, fine, you got Biden. Like, this was all about the election. This is a total scam. We all know this is a scam. We all know this is a scam for the election. You got the election. Now it's gonna be over, right? Like now it's over, right? You won, and we were wrong.
Yeah, and it was pretty quickly after January 21st of 21 that realization set in. I think it was a matter of weeks, amongst our mutual acquaintances, which was like buyer's remorse, times a zillion. It was like, oh no.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And in December, and there were a lot of articles coming out in December about how just because Trump wants to open school, like if I could, I just wish Trump would have said schools should be closed and then recorded like secretly, no, they should be open. And then like came out publicly and just said the opposite of what he thought so that everybody would just do the opposite. You know what I mean? And, but in December, there were a lot of good articles that came out in December. Our current Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, he was in, or however you say his name, he was in Florida helping Florida open schools, but no one ever talked about that. That Biden's future Surgeon General helped Florida schools open. They still to this day don't bring it up. But there was one article in December about that. There was a lot of good articles about schools in December, which had absolutely no bearing on anybody at all.
Yeah.
Because then the teachers got their vaccines and then nothing happened. And it just.
Yeah. Face palm. That's kind of how I remember that period as well. Mm-hmm. It's sort of a face palm within a face palm. So again, like obviously the first few months of the pandemic are like almost like month by month, week by week, but we're getting into where it's larger swaths of time. And the vaccines obviously came online around that time as well. Trump had initiated Project Warp Speed. And again, whatever you're comfortable with sort of saying about this, take us through your POV on the vaccines, right? Specifically for COVID. I mean, maybe starting, in the spring when Warp Speed was announced through, past the election through the initial rollout.
So at that point, it was so clear it's a disease that impacted the elderly, right? There was no question, although to this day, people pretend like there is. And the fat, right? The obese and the elderly. So when the vaccines finally were released, I had no intention of getting it early. I didn't care. I'd already had COVID. I know how COVID hits my body. I was not against getting it for if it was truly sterilizing, right? And like actually stop the spread as someone that, has old parents and knows, medically at risk people. I was like, fine, I'll get it once everybody has it. And then of course I was keenly aware of what was going on globally and thinking, okay, why would I get it before an old man in India gets it? Like, why don't we make sure our vaccines get to those in need around the world? Because I clearly don't need it. And apparently that made me selfish.
Well, that was the plan, though.
Or an anti-vaxxer or something, because I thought, why don't we make sure everybody that needs it gets it first, and then we focus on those that don't? So I was never intending just flat out not getting it. I got it a little later than most, and I because of my dad being in the hospital, and to go in to see him, you had to be vaccinated. Again, I did it assuming it was a sterilizing vaccine at the time, and I like how they pretend like they never said it was. But whatever.
Oh yeah.
But that was the only reason I got it. And as soon as and my family, there was no need. They'd all had it. Like, why? Like, again, I don't do something. I'm not going to get an injection just to make other people happy. Like, there has to be a benefit to it. Again, I'm the kind of person who runs a red light at 3 a.m. in the morning if there's no cars around. Like, I don't obey laws that there's absolutely no point, no value to. It's 3 a.m. There's no other cars around. I'm going to run the red light. I'm not going to get a vaccine just to make somebody happy. Unless it's going to provide benefit. So that's my stance on the vaccines. I was always on let's protect the vulnerable. Let's make sure everybody that needs it gets it. Yeah.
Well, that was the vaccine strategy, right? That was the playbook for the vaccines, right? Where we knew they were rushed, and we knew that there was not a lot of long-term data. the intention originally was to roll them out to the very people that you were just talking about, like the at risk, the elderly, the obese, and very quickly it was a crush. You know, it was just a bunch of people demanding to get them, and then you also at the same time had institutions demanding that their employees or visitors get them, and therefore people like you, in order to see your loved one, felt compelled to have to get this thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Huh.
At this point, I'm just tired. Like, I think you too. You're probably, I mean, you're doing this so that you're not as tired. I just, even going through and rehashing like 2 years ago, going through old tweets, it's painful to me. It's going through my old Facebook feed. It's just so painful. It hurts. It doesn't matter that I was right, because what I was right about sucks.
Yeah, I do agree. And I don't know if you've had this feeling, but throughout this, I've almost felt like I would rather be wrong in a weird way, you know, like just because like it would just, I don't know. Does that make any sense?
It would restore your faith. Like I would rather be wrong, and that, not that I want people to die, but it'd be nice to not have everybody on earth be crazy and stupid, right?
Exactly.
Like
same.
Right means everybody
that's what I mean.
is stupid.
Yeah. I had that thought before. It was like with the 15 days, you know, that was the first time I came out on my Facebook. I was like, I don't think this is a good idea. I think that this is a huge mistake. And when I wrote that and did that, it was, you know, it was like dropping an atom bomb into my, 1,000+ virtual friends. But I remember thinking like, you know, I really hope I'm wrong. Right. Because like, I don't like being a pariah. You know, I don't like being on the other side of this. Right. This is uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And Facebook is interesting, because that's where I did most of my open school advocacy. I think it was beneficial for a lot of people that were in the middle, because I was always posting open school articles from like the Washington Post and New York Times, or I'd find like trade show stuff and I'd post it there, and people would engage, but they would be respectful because of the source. And I feel like it was like a well that I was priming for. I don't know. I've had a few Democrats DM me and be like, you know what, you were right from the beginning. And I was like, okay, that feels good now, but like, come on, it really wasn't that hard to figure out.
Same. I had people DM me on the side. I'm like, why are you DMing me on the side? Can you please say something? I know it's tough. You know, not everybody can be out, right? And so let me ask you about that, right? Because we have a lot of friends who are anonymous, right, for various reasons.
Technically, I am too, right? Like I'm anonymous on Twitter for sure.
That is true. That is true. So what went into your decision to sort of not be totally you publicly?
You mean on Facebook, or like on putting my name on Twitter?
I guess Twitter.
So on Twitter, it came straight down to the doxing people, because now it doesn't seem, all the opinions we hold now they're not controversial anymore.
No, they still are, but they're not as controversial.
But no one's going to email my employer right now saying, you know, did you know
she wants kids in schools?
Yeah, exactly. She wants kids in school, and she says only old people and fat people need to worry about dying from COVID. Like like she's undermining our public health. Like right now, that email wouldn't go to my employer. And because my husband was a stay-at-home dad, I have a family I have to feed, and I have, so I did the most I could. Also, but the bigger difference is my identity would not have moved the movement forward at all. Right. Like showing, I felt like if I put my name on it, and that would have changed things in the public eye. If I was a Martin, if I was a Jay, if I had some sort of credentials for people to listen to, that would have been different. I'm a nobody. So putting my name out there, I didn't think was going to move it forward.
That's very interesting.
Just like my daughter's speech, I didn't post it on the internet when she spoke to the school board, because I didn't think her speech was going to change anything. And so why would I put her identity and our family at risk? Why would I open her up for public criticism if it's not going to make anything better? She's just a normal kid. So that's both basically, again, if I was more important, I would have put my name on it. If it was going to change something, I would have. I had everything to lose and nothing to gain by putting my real name on Twitter. That's
very interesting calculus. And as at that point you were the breadwinner of your family, and it makes total sense.
Yeah.
I think it's very interesting because, even though you're not, a name like a Martin or even like a Jen Say, right? It is very interesting the decision to be anonymous versus not. And again, there's so many people who have, jobs, whether they work for somebody else, right, or they own their own business. And you're right. For the last 18 months, it has been mostly dangerous to hold the opinions that we have, right? And again, eventually they will be proven, largely correct, I think. But it was dangerous to think those things.
I was in a weird position where one of my direct reports at work got into a Facebook argument with someone he didn't know, and the idiot has his place of employment on his Facebook profile. And so this person, who's a librarian, emailed my employer about this direct report I had, and it was brought to my attention. And my response was like, who cares? It's none of our business. The truth is the guy was an idiot, and we were putting him on plan anyhow. I was planning on firing him anyhow. But I agree, I was put in this position where I had to kind of defend him for being an idiot on Facebook, because I don't believe in firing somebody for what they put on Facebook. Just don't put your job on Facebook. But it's easy. Yeah, my LinkedIn, you can't find me on LinkedIn unless you're a connection, though. You Google my name, you can find out everything you want about me, who I'm friends with from college. It's absolutely disturbing, but you can't find me on LinkedIn by just Googling me. Nice. I locked it down.
Yeah, it's hard to be anonymous these days, in a weird way. So through the spring of 2021, and then fast forwarding through last year, was there anything about Biden's first year? There's a lot, I'm sure, but was there any specific things that jumped out at you as sort of important milestones in this COVID pandemic saga that stood out to you? I mean, I know that there's been so much. It's funny. I wrote this question down and I had a hard time answering it myself.
When I think about benchmarks, since Biden has taken presidency, all of my issues have been with the reporting, not necessarily with Biden. Like when they started labeling RSV as COVID.
Oh, yeah.
So in my head, that's one of the big benchmarks of that year, is when you had all these early articles about immunity debt, and then they realized, oh crud, we can actually leverage immunity debt for more COVID scare. And so the conversation about immunity debt dropped off, and then they started, and RSV dropped off, all this warning about RSV and all this warning about just dropped off, and then suddenly it turned into COVID panic again. And it was so clear that they were labeling the RSV cases and acting like immunity debt didn't exist. And when Kelly and I, we found all these, Kelly found that great egregious error in the data in Dallas where they had lumped all the infant hospitalizations for an entire year to 1 week and reported it as 1 week's worth of data. And it was that kind of data. Yeah, it was that kind of like Advent Health said that they've had XYZ hospitalizations since January. And I was like, well, how about since March when we had the vaccine? Why, we're in June, why aren't you using it from April, that you included January intentionally to inflate these numbers? And Advent Health, people are like, oh, Advent Health's a health system. Yeah, they also have hundreds of hospitals. It was that kind of I feel like last year was us picking apart crappy data and journalism. And that's how I don't really think of the Biden administration as much as I do this whole time. I feel like I've been battling the media, not the administration. The teacher dies of COVID stories, right? We didn't even get into that. How I've read every single teacher dies of COVID story. And I'm pissed at myself. It took me so long to realize what was not being reported in these stories. It wasn't being reported where they got it. It wasn't reported their age or even if they were working, right? And so not a single teacher died of COVID from school. And how all this propaganda was happening around teachers and COVID, yet you would never find an obese person dies of COVID story or an accountant dies of COVID story. But they were trying to keep schools closed. So they wrote all these propaganda, downright yellow journalism pieces about educators dying from COVID that got it while they were on vacation or they had retired or, so in my head, I've never seen me battling the administration. I've always seen me battling the media.
Interesting. I think you're right too. I remember the teachers in Florida story it was not that many months ago, but it was, they found out that they had caught COVID, but it was totally out of school. Like school hadn't even started yet. They just, they ran the story, a few weeks later when school had started, and they just left that out. They told the story and they just left out that.
And without
little
all
detail.
of us, they'd still be doing that. You notice that, okay, so I can tell you the very last teacher dies of COVID story or educator dies of COVID story, it was Jake Tapper. And he did it, and I found the guy who died's niece on Twitter, and she's like, yeah, he caught it at a family party 2 weeks beforehand. He didn't get it at school. And that, without us constantly pushing back on the bad data, without us constantly pushing back on those stories on Twitter that are terrible, they'd still be running them today.
Yeah. And I think that that's an important function that we, Team Reality serves, which is we have become, sort of the sixth estate, because we actually have performed a check on the media, to varying degrees for at least over 2 years now.
Yeah, like I've said, I don't do my own research. I do my own journalism. And when people say, are you an epidemiologist? I was like, let's look at the author of the story. What's her background? My background's in healthcare IT. Her background is she got a degree from El Paso University in journalism, and she worked for the Biden, for the XYZ administration for a couple of years. Like, why do you think she's any more of an expert than I am on this topic? Journalists aren't epidemiologists. They're English majors who think they're smarter than everybody else.
We've gotten a lot of feedback from the show that Jessica and I do. And again, we do it just, honestly, it's almost like
therapy,
psychotherapy. But people just kind of enjoy the yip yap back and forth. Again, it's like, to your point, we know our stuff to a certain degree. We've lived through this, we've done this, we've been, part of the push. We're original members of Team Reality. And I don't know. I think that, we may have helped things. I hope.
I mean, I know we have helped things without question. I know we have helped. We've kept the media in check without question. I mean, the American Academy of Pediatrics tweet I did,
oh my God.
It got national attention. It changed everything, right? Like it opened up it started making people question the American Academy of Pediatrics. But one tweet, right? Like just, and everybody in our team has a story like that where we expose something or we got something surface and without all of us doing it, like all of us, we need all of us. I remember seeing something a few years ago when I had 300 followers saying that, the media giants, the people out there in power don't worry about us with thousands of followers. They worry about the mom with a computer connection in her basement that starts asking questions. That's who they're worried about. And we got a lot of those over the past 2 years.
We do. To that end, I have a couple questions to take us through the end here. Thank you, by the way, for doing this with me.
My pleasure. Again, it's like therapy.
It is. So we talked about your first big follow. We talked about sort of the Team Reality peeps that you kind of noticed and started interacting with at first. Is there anybody who is a leader or an expert that you have been disappointed by in the last couple of years? Has anybody let you down? Is anybody like, oh my God, I really loved this person before this, and they've shown their true colors?
Stephen Dubner and Stephen Levitt of Freakonomics. This was their wheelhouse. They actually did a podcast where it was veiled so heavily. It's like I think they've had so much success they were afraid to be bold. And the podcast is on car seats and how we need a lobby for children, because in reality, car seats hurt children. And it's a really interesting podcast, but they don't say what needed to be said. And I've been very disappointed in Dubner and Levitt because they're better than this, but they have an empire now. And so there's a lot to risk by going against the mainstream. So they did everything that their brand says that they don't do.
It's really interesting how corrupted some people get. And I've been talking to my kids about this. Corruption isn't necessarily like a nefarious thing. It's not necessarily an evil thing. You know what I mean? Corruption is a function of having a vested interest, oftentimes a moneyed interest in certain things, which in turn cause you to second guess or govern what you say based on those interests. And money is a very corrupting influence. And I think that that's what you're saying, right? Like these people who built their brand on being sort of iconoclastic, on being skeptical, on being, sort of bringing up, hard truths. I love Freakonomics. I actually read all sort of the other books, the Undercover Economist. I love that dude. But you're absolutely right. The fact that, they have families, they have mortgages, right? They have mouths to feed. And they're making the same calculations.
Prestigious universities that were making tons of money off of COVID. Like these universities have banked thanks to the panic. So yeah, no, they had a lot to jeopardize. And, they said abortions are the reason the crime rate went down in New York, but they aren't bold enough to stand up for kids when kids need them. And they had the following and they could have helped change things and they chose not to. Another one's Malcolm Gladwell. He's smarter than this. We know Gladwell's smarter than this. He's smarter than this.
I'm a fan.
Yeah. So those were my three like massive disappointments from public figures.
Interesting. And I can see how they come from your POV of economics, because I'm an armchair. Before this, I was an armchair economist. I listened to Russ Roberts every week. I'm a huge fan of economics, and I know exactly what you're talking about. Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of you over the last 2 years, we know that masks were a big one for you, but was there anything that you changed your view on over the last 2 years that you were maybe, vociferously on one side or came down and, wanted X to happen and then, discovered that you were sadly mistaken?
Masks are probably the biggest thing for sure. I can't think of anything else because I've always been pro school and I've always been open, anti-lockdown, and I was never mandated mask either. Like I remember I was on that Mask for All website really early and I got a survey saying, would you support mandated masks? And I was like, oh, hell no, do not mandate these things. So at least I was on the right side of that. I really remember thinking about that question and being like, no, we don't mandate things. We're a free country. So other than that, like all the other changes are like my relationship with my faith, because they've made decisions. So I've had a real crisis of faith. Like just as I've seen Democrats have a crisis of their identity, I've gone through my own with my own faith because of how they've handled COVID. And
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Would you be able to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that's fine.
That's very curious to me, because a little bit of background, like you and I have talked a little bit about this. I'm an atheist and, we're still buddies.
Of course.
And that's very curious to me. So take me through that. Like what happened there?
So in our church, we have a living prophet, right? And they give modern day revelation. And sometimes the members of our church forget that prophets are flawed and they're individuals. I mean, the Bible is full of all the prophets' mistakes from, Noah was a drunk, Adam was a snitch, like Abraham told kings that his wife was a sister. I mean, like their prophets are not perfect people. But in this time and age, sometimes we treat our prophets as if they're perfect. And our church came out very pro-mask and mandated that teenage boys get vaccinated to go into the missionary training center. And I, knowing more, was very against both of these. That being, a mask is a lie. It says that not only is there something to be afraid of, but what I'm wearing is going to protect you from it. And Jesus never lied to be nice. Like wearing a mask isn't being nice. Lying, he never lied to be nice. And then, of course, we know what happened with the vaccine situation. So the church yesterday just rolled back that mandate for the vaccine.
Just yesterday.
And I have a little group. We have a little LDS group on Twitter in a chat, of course, where we go and talk about our issues with the church, because we still love Jesus Christ and we love the faith, but the church itself we have issues with. And the members we have issues with. And it's been a real, like all of us have gone through this evolution as humans, realizing what's our core values and developing a relationship with God and still being in the church, but not as into the church as we used to be. Because I still think it's a great framework for raising your family. Like it teaches good values. There's nothing about life. If I die and everything, I was wrong. If you're right and I'm wrong, there's literally nothing I would change differently about how I live my life now because of the beauty and the things the church has given me. That being said, having this being able to separate the man from it's been a real evolution for me. It's been a challenge for a lot of us.
That's interesting. So it's more of a problem with like the central structure,
the culture and the
right?
structure. Yeah, for sure.
Gotcha.
The culture and the structure.
It seems to be a theme, though, right? I mean, I've become over the last 2 years, I have become extremely, small government oriented, right? Like to me, at least, this has shown how even state level things, and I know it's not the exact same thing as a church, but it kind of is in a way too, where there's a central command structure, and once it gets past a certain size, right, these sorts of things expose the downsides of size.
Right. Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Yep, for sure. Small and nimble.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Hope we can learn some lessons there for sure. So you were wrong about masks. I was wrong about masks too. I know we've talked about that. Have you lost any good friends or good relationships over the last 2 years because of COVID?
There's a friend I've had since I was like literally 5 years old. She's a honors English teacher in California. I want nothing to do with her.
Oh, I'm sorry.
She was one of those like marching Black Lives Matter, but like she'd always tell me, I'll take a bullet for any of my kids. But yeah, you won't risk contracting a disease that you have a 99.999% chance of recovering from, but you'll take a bullet for your kids. Okay. Yeah. The person who said, oh my gosh, I stayed home, I saved lives. I was like, yeah, but what about the person who delivered all the food to you? Like what person that cooked the food? Like it's that typical self-righteous liberal, like just, and the thing is like,
seems to be.
Yeah, we were already like, I already didn't like her for a lot of reasons, but when you're friends with somebody from that long, you just kind of stick it out because you're like, we just have so much history together. And it was just like, I'm done. So like, I'm just muted. Like I didn't unfriend anybody. I just muted her on Facebook and muted her on Instagram. And then I have another friend who we didn't have a full falling out, but he knows I'm right. Now he knows I was right. And like, it's now like super awkward with us because there's no way he's going to admit he was wrong because he's the bleeding heart liberal, right? I'm the selfish conservative, right? And in the end, I was so right. I was so right, and you were so wrong. So that's it.
That's not bad.
Yeah,
two is not bad.
It helps to not have that many friends in the first place, Eric.
Oh yeah, well you're very caustic and unfriendly individual. So,
well, I have more friends now than I did before, without question.
Me too.
Right? That's great.
Absolutely. And I think that, our new friends, there seems to be a better connective tissue, right? Even though we don't all agree on the same stuff, not at all, but the things that we do agree on are way more important.
Way more important. And I thought I had that with people before. There's so many people I was disappointed in. I didn't lose them as friends. I was just disappointed they remained quiet, right? I thought you were better than that. There were a lot of people I was like, I expected more out of you. But yeah, this group that believes like actually has core values. It's a different kind of friendship.
Agree. Well, let's go out on a slightly more positive note. Are there any successes over the last couple of years? Are there any people that you were able to help? Transition is probably the wrong word, but sort of you saw, come on board or have pleasantly surprised you? Or what have been the bright spots?
So that's been surprising, is the people who stood with me this whole time are not who I thought would stand with me. It's a relative who, honestly, I didn't think of them as my favorite relative. They've been the loudest and the biggest supporter of opening schools, right? This is random. This out of all my relatives, this random relative, he's the guy. And like, we don't get along in anything else, but he's this kid that was a total jerk in junior high. Like, I could not stand him. He was a loud one. This girl in high school that like wouldn't talk to me and totally snubbed me all the time. Like, I am better friends with this popular girl in high school who snubbed me than my friend that I actually went through high school with that became a teacher. Like, it's just been the most random people I have built so much respect for. And yeah, the guy's still kind of a douche, but he said like he stood up when no one else did. And it's not like he has kids.
That's major points.
Right. Like he doesn't have
really
kids.
is.
He's just traveling the world, having a good time. And he stood up when no one else stood up.
And he doesn't have kids?
He doesn't have kids. He's
I
not
love
married. He
this
doesn't have
guy. I
kids.
love this douche. I love him.
Right.
Let's hang out with him.
Like I was like, dude, like you're like again, my priorities have changed. And so I have learned about my judgment and how judgment I place on others and like what I value. And yeah, it's interesting the people that pulled through in the end. And I'd say my biggest success from this whole thing was the groups that I set up. And hearing from others that those Twitter chats brought connection and help to people's lives. And I've been told a number of stories of just great stories of people that have been able to connect in the groups where they didn't think they had hope or they didn't think they had friends, and from people that were suicidal to making a friend in there and helping them get through it, to, you know, business connections. And I've gotten a lot of DMs just thanking me for the chats. And I feel like that was like I've always been looking for like my bigger purpose. And I was like, that was it. I just had to connect people. And so building those connections and setting up, you know, these larger Twitter chats so that everyone has that experience that you and I got. Like I wanted everyone to have that experience, that watching people get red pilled in real time experience, and figuring out how to give that to everybody. That's why I'm grateful I have the following I have.
And it's been massively helpful and successful. And I thank you so much for doing it, because even though I was in, you know, way too many groups before, I have been, you know, thanks to your work, I have been exposed to even more awesome, helpful people. And
yeah, the physicians,
so
the
wonderful.
lawyers, like those two chats, like for physicians to go and get backup, like for Dr. Lucy to be able to be attacked and have everyone have her back, like that. I wish we'd done that I wish we'd done that from the beginning.
It's funny because I thought the same thing, but it's interesting because it's almost like things happen for a reason, and they happen when they happen for a reason. And I think we could have done it earlier.
Could it be divine? Could there be a greater power helping that happen, Eric?
You know, for the record, atheist does not necessarily mean that you think that this is all an accident and math, right? It just means that you don't necessarily believe in like an accepted, you know, structured God. I'm actually a very, it is. I mean, it's funny because in the atheist community, agnostic is considered a little bit of a cop out. And I do use the term atheist, but it's kind of, you know, we run into this with a lot of other things. It's literally like a definitional issue, because atheist also includes agnostic. Agnostic is something that people, you know, sort of made up, but based on that definition, that's what I am. I'm a very spiritual person. I love all of the religions. I love the teachings. I mean, I watch Bible, you know, videos with my kids. I want them to learn this stuff. You know, we had this huge discussion a couple of weeks ago on, you know, sort of what the story of Adam and Eve actually means. And I love this stuff. It's just that I grew up in a Southern Protestant environment. I went to Bible camp as a kid. Honestly, I don't have any really bad memories of organized religion. I know a lot of people have, but that's not my POV. And we should totally talk for another 2 hours about this, because I could. I think it's fascinating.
We will. We should just hang out sometime, like as friends again. Like you should have come to Texas, right?
You know, I missed that. I missed the first one. And then the second one, I was at the Brownstone thing, which happened to be happening at the exact same time. So Team Reality had to kind of split for that weekend. But I heard you guys had a hoot.
Yeah, we just need to hang out. Like that's the thing is once this is all over, I want to get together because you're my friends. Like I feel like we just need to like relax and enjoy like just being together and not worrying about whoever.
And we do. Well, the times we've hung out, we do. I mean, it's so interesting because, you know, the virtual thing is tough. It was sort of forced on us.
Right.
And virtual relationships, yeah, they're not the same thing, but there's a lot of the same DNA there. And I think that, you know, once you know, have been talking to somebody or friends with them online, you know, you hear stories about this all the time. You know, people meet virtually, you know, over Xbox, and they meet in real life and they're just like, I love you, you know, like, you know, you may look like the Elephant Man, right? And I'm, you know, we don't speak the same language, but, you know, we have that connection, and that connection is real. So, you know, silver lining.
Yeah. I met my husband through a dating website back in the day. And we talked over the phone for like 4 months, right? Like 4 months of talking, and it worked out. So yeah, for sure.
Well, cool. Corey, show me the data.
Eric, thanks for having me on. This was it felt like therapy. So thank you.
Well, good. And again, I'm sorry it was painful to kind of go digging back through the archives, but again, we've established a historical record here. Each of us personally, and also as a group. And call me crazy, but I think if we're going to actually fix this, which we have a lot of work ahead of us, we're going to have to, right, like look back at that historical record and really be honest and learn from it.
Right. No, for sure. We do see our mistakes and help others not make the same mistakes and move forward.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all right. We will have you on again during the regular podcast to talk about all things awesome. But thank you, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye.
Bye.